This is Matt Hurt at Obsessive Viewer on Twitter.
This is Tiny at Obsessive Tiny on Twitter.
And this is ObsessiveViewer.com's The Obsessive Viewer Podcast. Hello and welcome to The Obsessive Viewer. We're a weekly movie and TV podcast that covers a specific topic, be it genre, trope, movie, or show, each episode. You can find back episodes at OV185.com, find the blog at ObsessiveViewer.com, and also find the Facebook group at on Facebook by typing in Obsessive Viewer Podcast in the group's search or whatever. I gotta think of a cleaner way to do that. First off, if you like what you hear and want to support the podcast, please head over to iTunes and leave a rating and review. The more ratings and reviews we get, the easier it will be for people to find the show in iTunes' search results. And if you want to show your support with your wallet, you can do that by clicking the donate button on ObsessiveViewer.com for a one-time donation, or by clicking the donate link in the show notes of this episode. You can also become a patron at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, where you can choose from many different reward tiers, including the popular $5 pledge of making us say anything, which would basically, you would tell us a sentence to say on the air that we will say, no matter what it is. Yeah, so that you can have some fun with that.
Yeah, you're really good.
Yeah. Any donations made will help pay the fees to keep the podcast running so we can continue to provide you with weekly movie and TV podcast episodes. And finally, tickets are now on sale for Shocktober in Irvington 3. Shocktober in Irvington is a one-night event screening of short horror films from local filmmakers here in Indianapolis at the Irving Theater. All the proceeds go directly to the Irvington Historical Society. It's a great night that we started 3 years ago, and we're really excited to bring it back once again to the great community of Irvington. And we're going to be raffling off a lot of great prizes throughout the night, screening some great short films, and interviewing the filmmakers in front of the audience. And it's going to be a blast. And as a special bonus for listeners of the podcast, you can get $1 off the price of admission when you use the promo code podcast1 when you check out when you buy online at shocktoberinirvington.com. So, having said all of that, Tiny, how are you doing today, sir?
I am doing today very well.
Great. That was a weird.
Yeah, it was.
It's like I wasn't going to call attention to it, but that's good. I'm doing today very well too. Been busy and everything, but I was able to run in and see Snowden at like the last possible minute.
Yeah.
For this review. So I'm looking forward to talking about it with you. That's our topic for the week, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So today we're going to be reviewing Snowden, the latest film from Oliver Stone, starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt as Edward Snowden, and also co-starring Zachary Quinto, Rhys Ifans. Am I pronouncing his name right?
Rhys Ifans.
Ifans.
I know it's Rhys.
Yeah, Rhys Ifans. Nicolas Cage, and also Shailene Woodley. Also Tom Wilkinson, Zachary Quinto, Melissa Leo.
Yep.
So anyway, this movie, I'm just going to go ahead and read the plot description from IMDb, and then we'll go right into the review. So, the plot description according to IMDb is the NSA's illegal surveillance techniques are leaked to the public by one of the agency's employees, Edward Snowden, in the form of thousands of classified documents distributed to the press. And this movie is a dramatization of the events that transpired between 2004 and 2013, and had worldwide headlines and was a huge deal. So Tiny, just in broad terms, Tiny, how do you feel about Oliver Stone?
I've said before, he's hit or miss for me. I feel like every time we get something like JFK or Platoon, we get something like Natural Born Killers or something really goofy or weird. I even feel like his documentaries that he's done are kind of there's a little bit too much Oliver Stone in there. If you ever seen the guy in an interview or listened to him in an interview, he's a very, very eccentric and erratically kind of attitude kind of person. Like he's an odd guy,
right?
And sometimes it's good when an artist is eccentric or weird because you get really amazing things, which he's done some really great movies. So you know, it's you got to take the good with the bad or whatever, and it's sometimes eccentricity leads to good art. So I have mixed feelings on Oliver Stone, but ultimately it piques my interest when I see that he's directing a movie or he's making another movie, because I'm like, well, is this going to be a really good one or is this going to be a really bad one? Because I think his really good ones are really good, and it's like I think his style stands alone from other directors, and I think you can really pick out and experience his style and what he's trying to convey when he's really, you know, running on all 8 cylinders and really making a good movie. So I appreciate his good stuff, and I'm disappointed when he comes out with bad stuff.
As opposed to the filmmakers that you're not disappointed when they come out with bad stuff.
Yeah, very much. That's why Snowden was kind of on my in our last episode was kind of on my honorable mentions.
Sure.
Which in retrospect, I knew I was going to like this movie. I probably should have just had it be one of my anticipated movies for the rest of the year, but that's hindsight.
Sure. So I lobbied pretty heavily to review Blair Witch.
Yeah.
But that's fine. No. So, you know, I don't really have that much of a history with Oliver Stone that much. I think the most recent, or the only thing of note, I don't know if I'd say that. What jumps to mind in regards with Oliver Stone's style or what I've seen of his is, oddly enough, W.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of had this thought while watching Snowden that it's kind of like... at one point in my life, when I was younger, I kind of got irritated when a filmmaker would inject so much of their political siding into a project.
Right.
And I thought W was okay. I don't really have fond memories of it. I haven't really thought about it since I saw it. I think that was one of those movies that I saw kind of in the middle of the night and I was half asleep. So, but I kind of remember feeling like it was a little bit, not cartoonish, not cartoonish, but kind of like, just clearly like, I don't know. I can't say with any confidence how I felt about it because I don't really remember it that well. But I just felt like it just didn't really have a lasting effect on me. So Snowden, I went in thinking like, okay, well, I don't really care at this point about personal politics or anything. I've made my peace. Like I've in the past I've been irked when a movie is injected with so much of someone's political leanings when they're making it. But now I'm at a point where it's like, well, no shit, Matt. It's an artist conveying their sentiments or their statements about it. Of course, it's going to be steeped in their political leanings. It's going to be steeped in their political beliefs. They're going to be a majority of the movie is going to be about how they feel about the subject. That's just how art works.
And that's politics too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, except a lot of people scream at each other and nothing ever gets done.
Right.
Which is why I love movies and TV instead of politics. But anyway, I'm the problem with America. But but anyway, so I went into Snowden I'm not a political guy. I'm not too interested in politics. I pay attention here and there, but it's not something that really piques my interest the way that, you know, film and television do. So I came at it from the perspective of someone who wasn't terribly familiar with the ins and outs of the Snowden controversy. I knew what happened, and I knew like the cliff notes of everything, but I didn't know like specifics. And I also know that I really, really like Joseph Gordon-Levitt. So I was primed to pretty much enjoy this movie. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from with that. That's a long-winded way of saying, regarding Oliver Stone, I'm not terribly inundated with his work. One of our listeners suggested we do an Oliver Stone retrospective.
Yeah,
which would be cool.
Yeah, honestly, I'd be game for that.
Yeah, we need to figure out how to do a retrospective because our time is so limited these days. So we'll work it out. But we owe our audience David Fincher retrospective first and foremost.
Yeah.
So anyway, So Tiny, how'd you feel about Snowden?
I really, really liked it.
Nice.
I was hesitating because of Oliver Stone to really be excited for it.
Mm-hmm.
And in retrospect, I shouldn't have been hesitant because I'm very intrigued by the real life story of what happened to Edward Snowden and what he did. I think it's really fascinating at any time where you have kind of blurred lines of right and wrong, like what some people consider this really wrong, some people consider it very right. That's always an interesting debate to me, and it's not so much about whether or not it emphatically is right or wrong. It's about how different people feel about it, and I find that very interesting when there's genuinely a gray area on something, and this is certainly one of those scenarios. So I should have known from the get-go that I was really going to like this movie, but I thought it would be hard to do because it's such a recent event. You're talking about everyone who's involved in this controversy is still around, and a lot of these people still have power. So I thought it was almost a little bit untimely, which you could say the same thing about a lot of his movies. W, for example.
World Trade Center,
yeah. W came out while George W. Bush was still in office, which is kind of a weird thing. So I think Oliver Stone struggles with timing. But despite that, I think this movie really, really worked. I feel like we got a really great feel for all the characters. The timeline was laid out really well. It had some really nice unlinear structuring to it, if you will.
Non-linear.
Sorry, some non-linear structure to it, and it was surprisingly visual for a movie that's kind of mostly about people talking. So I think on many different levels, I think it was a really successful movie.
Nice. I'll agree to quite a bit of that. I had some irks about the movie, but overall, I was really happy to see how well the information was conveyed in the movie. It's very much it's a very watchable film, and it's something that I remember. I remember a while ago. I believe for Potpourri one episode, forgive me, I don't remember what episode it was, but I remember for Potpourri you brought up the documentary Citizen 4.
Yes.
Which, from my understanding, is essentially a documentary about the meeting in the hotel room that's depicted in the movie.
Yeah, it was like the character of Melissa Leo is a real person.
Is the filmmaker.
She's the filmmaker who made that documentary, and it's basically I remember saying that I liked the documentary so much because we were watching a crime being committed.
Oh, nice.
But it was someone sitting there telling the truth and committing a crime at the same time.
Okay.
I thought that was a really cool juxtaposition.
Nice. And guys, you can listen to Tiny talk about that in episode 96 of the podcast.
Nice.
But anyway, I really liked the way that all of the information was divulged to us, and like you said, it's the way that it has the nonlinear structure, and it has everything like that builds suspense in a movie that, like Tiny, like what you said, is about a lot of people talking and a lot of big accusations and a lot of big depictions of things that are like shocking,
right,
and horrifying. Depending on where you are on the where you land on this particular issue, but the implications of a lot of the things that Snowden is mentioning throughout the movie, and you get a sense of the toll that it takes on him, both physically, mentally, and just emotionally. And I felt like that was conveyed really well, and I really appreciated it for that. However, like, and maybe this is just me. Maybe this is me seeing it at 9:50 at night, but I don't think that's the case. I looked at my watch and it was like 11:30, and I was like, I still have another hour of this. It's like,
really?
Yeah, it was just like, I just felt like, man, it's just kind of, maybe it was just in that part, it kind of dragged a little bit, but I just felt like, I wanted it to ramp up a little bit more to lead to, the big moments that I was anticipating. It was just kind of, it meandered a little bit in the middle there.
I think I agree with that to an extent. I feel like it could have used a tiny bit of editing. I think it should have been a little bit under 2 hours. For me, it was kind of the sections where we got the conflict between Edward Snowden and his love interest throughout the movie.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that because I know in real life, like, Edward Snowden is really in love with that girl.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I think it was an important part of what makes Edward Snowden.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, he, Oliver Stone felt obligated to leave that in the movie. And I think it was a good character piece to experience. And I bought it. I thought they had good chemistry. A lot of good things about that. But at the same time, I kind of wanted to get back to the focus of what this story really needs to be about. And it's, it's about the whole, it's about the whole surveillance community, if you will, and the intelligence community and the flaws in that design and stuff like that. That's what the movie's supposed to be about. But from a creative standpoint, you have to be true to your characters. So I think it affected the flow just a little bit, in a negative way. But I can't really hold it too much against the filmmakers and everyone involved. Sure.
And it's funny. I really... You bring up Shailene Woodley's character Lindsay in the movie, and it's funny because so I felt like that whole relationship could have been explored a little more.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I appreciated the things that they did with it, or like how they told that part of the story. For the most part, I mean, there's a lot of conflict there because he is being torn in so many different directions. He can't say anything to her. There's a lot of conflict there. But to be honest, you could have sat me down after the movie and said, hey, the character of Lindsay was mostly fabricated for this movie for dramatic effect. And I would have been like, I can totally see that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And that's a shame because, she's a real person.
Right.
But that's not to say that they didn't have chemistry. I thought that they were, their scenes together were really strong. There's one in particular where they get into a fight or an argument over something. It's actually funny. It involves covering up the webcam on the laptops, which about a month or so ago, or a few months ago, or a couple months ago, I don't know when it was, but I mentioned on the podcast that I recently just taped a piece of paper over my webcam because I listen to The Simpsons while I sleep. That's a weird sentence.
Yeah.
But I leave my laptop open because I watch it on my laptop, and I'm just thinking like someone could just turn it on and watch me sleep.
Yeah.
Which is disturbing. But it's funny because in the movie, he puts Band-Aids over the thing, and I'm like, when I saw that, I was like, that's such a better way to do it. Like, I felt like an idiot that I didn't think of that.
Plus, it's kind of ironic imagery, if you will. A Band-Aid, putting a Band-Aid on it.
Yeah. Symbolism.
Yeah. Symbology.
I didn't even think. I don't know why they didn't. I was so impressed that that was such an effective answer to that.
I don't know if that was intentional or if he actually did that in real life.
Now that you say it, I wouldn't. I think that could be. Yeah.
Yeah, it could have just been for dramatic effect. But
yeah.
Who knows?
But there's a scene where they're kind of arguing over it. They're getting into a bit of an argument over it, and like that's such a really good scene for me because they're both. The movie is exploring the deeper meanings of the messages of the movie and the implications of what's going on, while also giving some dramatic meat to their relationship. And there's some things revealed in it that, like in that scene, that are alarming. And I kind of wish that as a relationship, as I think that I would have preferred for that kind of a relationship part of the movie to be explored more, because I thought that was really good for dramatic effect, and I wish that there was more to that, but it was kind of scant throughout it. But yeah, and just the way that she was incorporated, I kind of felt a little bit bad for Shailene Woodley, because it kind of felt like she wasn't given all that much to do. She was just kind of like angry and frustrated that he couldn't say anything, and it was just, I kind of wish that it's something that irks me when there's a character who is like the love interest of a main character who kind of just isn't as fully developed or fully formed from my account. So I kind of wish that there was a little bit more care taken for the relationship.
Yeah, that's true. And they did kind of spin it. They attempted to spin it as her being somewhat instrumental in his, in Edward Snowden's evolution as a political person, about how he kind of changed some of his opinions.
Yeah, and I appreciated that a great deal. I thought that was pretty cool. I just wish that they would have shown that instead of told us it.
Me too.
Yeah,
I agree with that. There wasn't enough of that. I feel like his character does go through a philosophical and political evolution throughout the extent of the timeline of the film. And I felt like that was a little bit underexplored. Because at the beginning of the movie, he thinks one way and he's very, very serious about that and set in his ways. And by the end, he kind of changes he really changes his leanings and how he thinks about things. And I feel like that inspiration was not externalized very well by his character.
Right.
And clearly he's a very shy person. He's not extroverted. He's kind of a typical IT techie kind of guy, pretty introverted and quiet and stuff like that. But I feel like when you go through something like that, it's not a peaceful change. You go through some things and you shed some emotions and stuff like that.
Right.
And I feel like we should have gotten a little bit more of that from the character. I was okay with what we got, but
yeah.
I think that's something that could have been expanded on pretty healthily and pretty well.
I agree completely. And it's funny because the political leanings of him, his political ideologies that are explored throughout the movie, it's funny because we're shown that it's her influencing his political beliefs a little bit, but mostly it seems more due to just his experience in the NSA.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's more to that fact. And that's fine. That makes sense. That's great. But it's just like, I kind of just wish that there was more meat to their relationship in the movie. And I can talk a little bit more about it in spoilers a little bit, but there's scenes like on their first date when she's taking photographs of him, and just like the poignancy of those pictures and the way that it's juxtaposed by the opening scene of him in the hotel room saying like not wanting his picture he hasn't had his picture taken in years. It's just like the juxtaposition of that with the first date is just really compelling, and I kind of wish that there was more about the emotional core of his relationship and how that functioned, or how that influenced his decision making and everything a little bit more. Just like there's stuff there. There's some really good stuff there, but it's just I just wanted just a little bit more.
I agree. I think some of the other interesting development we get from the character of Edward Snowden is through the other relationships he has professionally. Most notably with Reese fans and Nicolas Cage's character, who are kind of older, more sage-like. What's the word I'm looking for? Like
father figures,
father figures, not protege.
Mentors.
There you go. Words. And it's funny because they serve two different roles. You know, Reese Fance is the very, Corbin was his character's name. He was the pusher. He was the ambitious guy who feels like, I got into government because I like being powerful. I like wielding power. I support the state, and it's like I got into this because I want to. I never want to cede any kind of power. Like if someone wants to give me more power, I'm going to take it, and I'm going to move forward with it, and we're going to do whatever we possibly can to expand our influence around the world. And
right.
Incidentally enough, Nicolas Cage's character is kind of the polar opposite of that. He's very jaded. He tried to do the right thing early on, and it kind of led him down a darker path. And he refers to himself as being tucked away in a little office in the basement of the training facility for the CIA. And he just kind of works on old computers now. He doesn't really do much. And he's very jaded, and someone, along the way he's realized that, he joined started working for the government to make a difference and make things better, make the world more free, whatever kind of ideology he had. But once he gets in it, he finds out that that's really not what government's about. It's about what he describes in the movie, and I don't really want to spoil that. I think that was a pretty poignant moment of the movie. And it's just I really appreciated both of those characters because I feel like that's what the government's full of. It's someone who's super ambitious and wants to get as high as he possibly can, or it's the guy who really wants to make a difference, and after 10 years he realizes that that's never going to happen, and he becomes very jaded. And I feel like a lot of government employees are like that. So I appreciated the realism of that and how it really influenced the main character, because he really played both sides of that field for a while, and it led him to where he is now.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's pretty bleak.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. His kind of colleagues in the movie. There's that one guy. I was just looking for his name. Is it Gabriel? The guy who shows him the technology that they're using at first.
Yeah, the NSA guy. Yeah.
I thought he was really good.
Yeah.
Because there was a really interesting dynamic between him and Snowden throughout the movie, because he is depicted as such a somewhat likable guy, but he is so his what's the word I'm looking for? His conscience, his conscience doesn't, like, the things that he's doing is so second nature to him, and so just, he has no conscience about it. Mm-hmm. But there's kind of a growth there that also is mostly off screen, but it's kind of, they have this kind of professional friendship throughout the movie.
Yeah.
That it's just, I liked seeing the way that he and his colleagues interacted with one another.
I agree.
Yeah.
He was, his attitude, the nonchalance with which he hacked into someone's computer and watched them do something behind closed doors was disturbing. Just the way he was like, oh, Facebook's my bitch, and he just totally logs onto gets into someone's Facebook account and finds out who their friends are, and oh, this person's related to him, and so we're going to look at this person now. And it's interesting how quickly you can go from one person to the next and make connections between someone who is entirely innocent and has never done anything wrong in their life. And, just make 2 or 3 connections and you're looking at Osama bin Laden. It's really, really fascinating. And the fact that Edward Snowden's character realizes that and realizes how untenable that is and how disturbing that is. But Gabriel is just like, oh yeah, it's just what I do. Like, this is my job. Like,
yeah,
that's what I do. It's just something. It's just another piece of technology for him. It's not really, he doesn't understand the weight of it, I guess, or maybe he does, but it doesn't have any effect on him.
Exactly. And I really like the way that the movie there's kind of a balance, or there's some care made to really not make it go too over the top in terms of the it doesn't paint this in terms of like it being pure evil and terrible. There's no it's like you can kind of see the justification for some of the things about it. I'm kind of stumbling here, but for instance, it's like they don't show it like, okay, this is the most terrible thing that you can possibly do with this technology. It's kind of grounded. Like, I have no idea what things in it that they of them showing spying on citizens and all that. I don't know to what extent like that is truthful to what actually happened, but I really like the way that the dramatization of it was played out, because it's like our opening introduction of it is Gabriel and in Snowden watching a woman on a webcam get undressed, and she is in a burqa, and it's like that. Like you can show just they could have shown just like a woman getting undressed and it being so like it could be so scuzzy and gross of them, but to show this woman who's wearing like religious garb, disrobe, and like being seen like naked like completely naked, not on film, but like having them watch her undress,
Right.
is just adds such a big level, like such an added scuzziness to
It's
it. Taboo, yeah.
It's another level of taboo. Yeah.
It's more disgusting that it's in that scenario because it's so much more disrespectful and what's the word, like invasive.
Yeah.
I got it like right when you said it. It's so much more invasive giving that scenario, and I like that they went that route instead of just showing like, oh, this woman is getting naked. It's like they went to the extent of showing her in religious garb getting taking off her clothes. It's just that adds so much more invasiveness without going over the top and showing like them just perving out on a bunch of people.
Right.
It's like kind of an opportunity knocks kind of situation that he was watching her.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I really liked the way that there's at least one sequence where they show it's probably my favorite part of the movie, where it's a visual representation of how the surveillance works. It's that they can go. He's explaining to the filmmaker that they can go look at one person, target one person, get access to everyone that he has been in contact with, and then look into them and then get contacts for everyone that they've been into. So he, like, the way that he phrases it is like, after 3 jumps, you have access to like something like 2.5 million people.
Right.
And it's just like the visual representation of that with like kind of wires and it's like kind of a static, not staticky, but like this, what's the word I'm looking, like a
fiber optic kind of
fiber
thing.
optic. Yeah,
Yeah.
Great. Like a fiber optic representation of it just going all over a map and everything. Just the visual representation of that just really brings home just how surreal this scenario is. And that's something I really appreciated about the movie as well. So in terms of them actually depicting the everything that's wrong with what was going on and is going on, was really, they were really powerful imagery. There was really powerful imagery played out throughout it.
I agree. Yeah, they that scene you were describing too, that they use an analogy in it, a visual analogy that I won't spoil. I want people to see it. I thought it was really pretty poignant. And I agree. Like I said earlier, I think this movie is surprisingly visual. It has a very visceral feel to it, because I think, again, Edward Snowden's kind of an internalized guy, and I feel like he doesn't express a lot of things. At least he didn't before. And so to see, we kind of get some views inside his head where he's kind of thinking about things that have happened in his past that have led him to this scenario and this event in his life. And we kind of see it. It reminded me a little bit of how Danny Boyle uses flashbacks.
Yeah.
Most notably in 127 Hours, where it's a way to see inside the character's head without having them just tell you what they're thinking. And I feel like Oliver Stone tapped into that a little bit in this movie, and I thought it worked really well. Again, given the nature of the character and his personality, I think it made a lot of sense. And I really appreciated the movie for that. I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting a lot of talking heads, and a lot of simple camera angles and whatnot. I wasn't expecting too much intricacy, but we got a little bit, and I think it worked to great effect. There was another scene that on paper seems a little bit ridiculous. I thought it was a little comic booky, kind of caricature animated. There's a moment where Edward Snowden is confronted by his main mentor, Risa Vance, and it's over like a video conference. And again, I don't want to spoil this, but just the dynamic of it, it involves a very large screen, and it just seems comical in real life. Like, why would that happen? Why would you have a screen that big? Why would someone video conference that way? It seems a little goofy,
right.
And just the angles that are used for the camera. But I think it was an interesting choice. It was a big gamble, and I think it sort of worked. At least it worked for me. I'm sure some people thought it was stupid, but I just thought it had a very Orwellian 1984 Big Brother's watching you kind of thing to it. And it's like the main character was felt like he was experiencing what he's been doing to others. Again, I'm trying to tiptoe around it without spoiling it. You really just need to see this scene to really comprehend what I'm trying to convey here. It was a very surreal moment for the main character, I think, and I think the way Oliver Stone chose to visually represent it was a really bold choice that, in my book, I think it worked, and it's one of my favorite parts of the movie.
I will totally agree with you on that point, and I will also agree that it's a little not necessarily comic booky, but the comparison I draw is it felt like the kind of thing you would see in I don't know like kind of a Call of Duty cutaway scene. Like the context of it, but I appreciated what they were doing. The content of that conversation in that scene really that came at kind of a point where up until that moment I don't know if that was really the point of it. Well, yeah, that point of it. That was like right before that was where I was looking at my watch thinking like, oh, I have an hour left, and then like when that scene happened, I was like, oh, okay, we're going into it. We're in it now. And that's where the pacing kind of picked up for me.
Yeah.
After the second half, in the second half, I should say. But yeah, I really liked that. And let's see, there was one other thing I wanted to bring up, and we can kind of start winding down a little bit.
Okay.
But first of all, going back to your Danny Boyle comparison, there was one part in particular that felt like I thought for a second like this feels like a Danny Boyle movie, and I think that might be what you were referring to. But
it would have been sidetrack. It would have been amazing to see him make this movie.
That would have
been really cool.
Yeah, it would have been kind of cool to see him in Sorkin, Steve Jobs style.
Yeah,
but anyway, man, I hope that they work together again.
Me too.
Obviously not Steve Jobs, but Danny Boyle and Aaron Sorkin.
Oh my god.
Anyway, I'm sorry. Anyway, but yeah, so one thing that I really was kind of taken with, it took me a little bit to get warmed up to. The music in the movie felt at times like they were, like, I was in the theater alone, so I'm allowed to do this. But like, I looked up at one point. I looked up on IMDb like who composed the music, because I was so sure that it was Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. But no, it's someone completely different, and I kind of felt like maybe they were kind of cribbing from the music Trent Reznor's done. It was Craig Armstrong did the music for the movie.
Okay.
And it kind of felt like this, and maybe that's more to do with it being just a techno or technological type of movie, or a movie that's so dependent on computers and things like that and tech, because that's kind of something that I associate the work of Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross with their scoring work, at least with their work in The Social Network. So seeing Snowden kind of doing like his little computer thingies made me think of The Social Network. But anyway,
yeah, I really wish I would have made a better note of the music in the movie. I picked it up on it a few times. It had a very electric sound to it, which I thought was poignant, and it made sense. Kind
of electronic, kind of.
Yeah. I thought it made sense, but I wish I would have made better note of it.
Yeah, but there was a moment kind of really early in the movie, one of the opening scenes, where we get the movie opens with just an introduction to Snowden in the hotel room with the documentarians and the journalists, and then we get our first flashback to 2004, where he's training in the special forces, and just like the way that Oliver Stone shot that scene when we first get to the flashback where it shows 2004 and it shows him them marching or whatever, just like the way that shot's composed, the way that the sun is kind of setting behind them, and the music has this really patriotic sound to it, that at that moment, like that's the last moment we kind of hear that type of music that I can remember. But like that like really, really pulled me in, because this is a story about a guy who loses so much faith in his government that he did what he did.
Some people consider it treason.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So And that's up to you to decide
Right.
how you feel about it.
Yep.
But yeah, and I think that should we kind of wrap things up here?
I think so. Yeah. What would you give it like overall?
Ooh, I would give it
3 seconds.
Oh,
2. I'm kidding.
I would give it probably 7.5. I'm trying to think of a good scale to use. 7.5 Rubik's cubes out of 10.
Nice.
Yeah. How about you?
You know, I'm gonna give it a really solid 8 classified documents
Nice.
out of 10. I mean, part of me initially I was like, that's like an 8.59 to me. That's how much I really enjoyed it, but kind of analyzing it over the last 24 hours, and I want to like give it another rewatch before I commit to an 8.5 or 9. But it's a solid 8. Even with a rewatch, I think I'll still feel that way. I enjoyed it quite a bit, and personally, I'm glad someone made this movie. I'm glad someone made it well, because I'm very intrigued by this story, and just not to get political at all, but I think Edward Snowden's a hero, and so that's just how I feel about it personally. So I'm glad someone did it as well as they did.
And it's funny.
I just put us on another watch list also.
Yeah. It's funny because, and I feel like maybe we shouldn't have started to wrap it up, because how'd you feel about Joseph Gordon-Levitt?
Oh, that's true. We didn't
really talk anything about.
Didn't talk about much about any of their performances really.
Yeah.
I thought he was fantastic, and bias because I love him and everything. But I mean, I think he has. A lot of the time when I see him, I just see Joseph Gordon-Levitt,
Right.
and I'm fine with that because he's so likable and he's a fun guy to watch. But I really saw Edward Snowden when I watched this movie. I saw the documentary, and he really, Joseph Gordon-Levitt really nailed his kind of speaking cadence and his voice. It was a little bit low, like he clearly used like kind of a lower register, which sticks out a little bit, I think. But it just feels true to the actual Edward Snowden, without being like a total imitation or like trying to really just nail every single aspect of the guy. He didn't have any crazy makeup or goofy crap like that.
Right.
I just felt like he embodied the characteristics of Edward Snowden that were important. And he did a great job.
It's funny, when I first saw the first day that I saw the first trailer for Snowden, was a day I just happened to rewatch 500 Days of Summer. And so seeing that trailer and seeing the way that, or hearing the way, and I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but hearing the change in Joseph Gordon-Levitt's voice that he did made me kind of worried, thinking like, am I going to be distracted by this voice the entire movie? But I mean, seeing the movie within the first 10, 15 minutes, like I was just totally absorbed in his performance.
Yeah.
I thought he did a phenomenal job. And not just with the way that, like, as you said, the lower register that he used for his voice and the tone, but also like you said earlier, Snowden is this kind of shy, reserved guy, and he's kind of a quirky, a little bit quirky kind of guy.
Yeah.
And I mean, just like there was so much subtlety and nuance to Joseph Gordon-Levitt's performance in this movie that it just really elevated the story for me quite a bit. It made me really entranced by his performance and really into the story. Even though I had some issues with it, or some grievances with the way some things were handled, such as the relationship, most of all. But that performance was just outstanding, because you felt the reserve or you felt the conflict with brewing inside of Snowden the entire movie, and I really appreciated that level of nuance to the performance.
I agree. Yeah, and I recommend people go see the documentary Citizen 4 to see what Edward Snowden is really like. He's a very calculated guy, and he speaks with purpose, and he doesn't he doesn't have a lot of and and well, he doesn't do a lot of that. He knows what he's going to say, and he's an articulate, calculated person, and I think Joseph Gordon-Levitt embodied that really well. So he was awesome.
He doesn't have any or dropped words or anything, so he's clearly not a host of the Obsessive Viewer podcast.
Yeah. He would crush on this podcast.
Yeah. So overall, I would, before we kind of wrap up the review, I just want to ask, like, where does this land for you, Tiny, on, like, will this land on your top 10 list at the end of the year, do you think?
Without question.
Oh, nice.
It's top 5 right now.
Very nice.
Yeah, but we got big season coming up, so we'll see. But I would be shocked if it's not in my top 10.
Very cool.
How about you?
Cool. It's kind of early to tell. I think that it might. I would see it be like in the low tens, in the latter half of the tens. Maybe
Okay.
It would be in my top 10. I think at this point.
Cool.
But there's a lot still to come out.
Right.
Yeah. So we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that'll about do it for our review of Snowden. Before we get going to a quick potpourri, because we're going to be recording a bonus episode, reviewing Stranger Things directly after this recording. I think you still good on that?
Oh yeah.
Okay, sweet. But before we go to potpourri for that, before we go to potpourri, I threw out a question in the Facebook group, which you can find on Facebook.com. Just type in Obsessive Viewer, podcast and look for it under groups. I asked, tonight we're recording our review of Snowden. Did you see Oliver Stone's latest film this weekend? And if so, what did you think? And we got 2 responses. First of all, Robert Feckus, frequent guest on the podcast, said, I thought it was a very good film outlining the importance of the surveillance debate. It's a shame not a lot of people saw it. Joseph Gordon-Levitt killed it as Snowden. I do, though, want to know if the Rubik's Cube toss is really how he got the data through security.
I'm curious about that myself.
I'm very curious about that, too, and I kind of wish that they hadn't shown that in the trailer, because it's fairly late in the movie, and, like, it's set up so well, like you see the Rubik's Cubes kind of throughout the movie. I kind of wish that they would have, hid that from the marketing, but
yeah,
whatever.
Agreed.
And then the other comment was from Matt Andraco, our Patreon subscriber, which you can join him on Patreon by being a patron at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer.
Mm-hmm.
But he said, I almost never get to see movies on opening weekend. I'm still excited to see it though. So he hasn't actually seen it yet, but not really knowing him too well, I feel like I still feel comfortable saying, like, I feel like I think he would appreciate this movie.
I think so too. Yeah.
Even though I don't know him that well.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
He's a computer guy.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
he'd like it.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to switch over to a quick potpourri, but before we do that, here's a promo for Shocktober in Irvington 3, which again is on October 14th, 2016 at the Irving Theater. Short horror films, local filmmakers, DVDs, prizes, gift cards to Irvington businesses. Awesome. Go to Shocktober in Irvington for more information. ShocktoberInIrvington.com.
Tickets are on sale now for the 3rd annual Shocktober in Irvington, presented by the Obsessive Viewer podcast. Join the hosts of the Obsessive Viewer on October 14th, 2016 at the Irving Theater for a one-night event screening of short horror films, including the premiere screenings of J.P. Lex The Roman, the latest entry in his cross-mediumed Elsewhere World universe, as well as the latest slasher from Snapshot Productions and Billy and Brandon Watch Movies. All of this and so much more. Come celebrate the horror genre in the historic Irvington area and get a chance to meet the filmmakers with live interviews after each screening. You can also win DVDs, Blu-rays, and gift cards to Irvington businesses. Tickets are on sale now at ShocktoberInIrvington.com. All proceeds will go directly to the Irvington Historical Society. And we will see you at the Irving Theater on October 14th. That is, if you dare.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and switch over to potpourri now. It's going to be a quick potpourri section. For our first-time listeners, potpourri is a section of the podcast where we kind of wind down the episode and talk about things we've watched, things we're looking forward to, things that don't necessarily fit in with the main subject of each podcast episode. So we each have one thing that we're going to bring up. And Tiny, do you mind if I go first?
Go for it.
Okay, sweet. So mine's going to be really brief, but so longtime listeners will know that Shocktober, as we so affectionately call it, the month of October is a big month for us, at least for me and Mike, our co-host, is on sabbatical. Tiny, I know you're not too huge a fan of horror.
Yeah.
But me and Mike are huge fans of the horror genre. So we're now at the time of this recording, we're closing in on October, Shocktober, as we call it. So obviously, it's time to kind of get into the spirit, even though the weather here is unseasonably hot and not at all.
It's not cooperating.
It's not
and
autumny.
It sucks.
Yeah. I want it to be hoodie weather. But anyway.
Yeah.
So, kind of in honor of Shocktober's fast approach, I finally checked out this web series that's been going on for about a year and a half. It's called The Witching Season. You can find it at witchingseasonfilms.com. It's this really, really incredibly well-produced horror anthology where each episode is its own standalone short film. They run about 10 to 17 minutes long. There's 3 episodes available now. There's Killer on the Loose, Princess, and Not Alone. And each one has a specific theme, specific feel to it. Killer on the Loose is kind of a send-up or not a send-up, but it's like a homage to like this slasher film, which has it's really tense, it's really interesting, and has some interesting turns in it as well. And then there's Princess, which is a really creepy, atmospheric, unsettling haunted doll episode short film. And I've only seen those 2. I haven't seen Not Alone yet, which is apparently an alien invasion or alien type of horror short. So the first 2, Princess and Killer on the Loose, are just really well done, and I really love the way that what they're doing is so in keeping with what I love about the Halloween season. So I've been thinking about this lately. I'm a fan of the Halloween franchise, the movie franchise, the Halloween franchise. We did a whole retrospective, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, on the podcast, which is actually surprisingly one of our highest downloaded episodes.
Nice.
Yeah. So anyway, we went through every movie of the horror of the Halloween franchise, and it was 2 years ago. But anyway, so I'm a big fan of the Halloween franchise, and we've talked a lot about Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, but one of the things about it that stick out to me, even though the movie is pretty terrible, is that it was conceived as, they were going to make, John Carpenter's idea was that they were going to make a movie a year. That was all. It was going to be an anthology series. Every movie was going to have something to do with Halloween. It's going to capture that atmosphere, and they were going to do that. Obviously, Season of the Witch, kind of, after that came out, they just were like, nope, bring back Michael Myers right now, and we'll do that instead. But I feel like there's such a void. Like that idea is so beautiful to me. Like, I really wish that there was this yearly Halloween themed thing. Like we got a really great film that captured the spirit of the Halloween season in Trick or Treat, which is a DVD that you could potentially win at Shocktober in Irvington, just saying. But anyway, Trick or Treat was perfect at that, but there's only one Trick or Treat. There's been rumors of a sequel, but what I so appreciate about the Witching Season is that what they're doing, the tone that they're striking in each of the short films, the level of production value that's put into, like, there's an insane amount of work clearly that goes into these short films, and you can really see it. Those things are just, they're itching, they're scratching this itch that I've had for a while, and I'm so on board with it. I really love it. So so that you can find that at witchingseasonfilms.com. It's really really entertaining horror Halloween fare.
Awesome. I would watch the crap out of whatever you're describing.
Nice.
The whole, because it could be a TV show, it could be a movie, it could be a series of movies, it could be anything. I agree with you, and I would watch the crap out of that.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you can on YouTube.
Nice. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna check them out.
Sweet.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's my potpourri. Tiny, why don't you round us out with what you got?
Sure. I wanted to talk about the movie Imperium, which came out.
Oh, did you see that
recently? Yeah,
nice.
I watched it on VOD. I was really excited for it. I mean, it's I was really excited because of Daniel Radcliffe in it. To be honest, I wanted to see him tackle that kind of role. And honestly, I think Daniel Radcliffe is the best thing that could have happened to this movie.
Really?
Yeah, it was a good movie. I wanted a really dark, a really gritty undercover law enforcement officer kind of movie. And I think I wanted something really gritty and just I wanted something kind of like American History X, which is a very gritty movie about white supremacists and interesting characters and everything. That's what I really wanted, and this movie tapped into that quite a bit. But I just wanted a little bit more from it. I feel like it had a little bit too much. It had a little bit of gloss in areas where I wanted it to be gritty, and maybe those are very overused adjectives in the film community, and they definitely are, but that's the best way I can describe it. The movie is about a kind of reserved, idealistic FBI agent played by Daniel Radcliffe who chooses to go undercover to investigate white supremacy groups in the Virginia, Maryland area. And it's based on a true story. I don't know really anything about the true story. And the what was most important to me about the movie is that Daniel Radcliffe crushes this role.
Nice.
Because I've been a big fan of him forever because of Harry Potter. And I always, throughout that series, once it started to pick up, I think, I always thought, I can't wait to see what he does next, because I think he learned a lot with that franchise, and he impressed myself and a lot of other people, and I was like, I think this kid has tons of potential. He could be really awesome. And thankfully he did a fantastic job in this movie. I mean, I did not see any Harry Potter. I wasn't looking for any wands or anything throughout this movie. He completely disappeared into the role. And he was really scary at times and really just a really intense character. It's interesting to watch. You're watching an actor play a role, and then the role he's playing is also playing another role because he's undercover. It was very fascinating to watch that process, and I like that environment for a story, an undercover agent. I think it's just a really cool thing. Daniel Radcliffe was a standout. Toni Collette is also in there as kind of a mentor character. Sam Trammell, who's famous for True Blood, is in the movie. I've never been a really big fan of his. Not that he's bad. I don't know. I haven't been overly impressed with him ever. But I think in the first part of this movie, he did a really good job. I actually really bought his character. And he was kind of a unique character for this environment and this setting. The only problem was his character goes through a transformation in the last third of the movie, and I really didn't buy it very much from him.
Oh yeah.
I don't think he sold it very well. But I give him a lot of credit for what he did early on in the movie, and I think he did a pretty decent job.
When you say he goes through a transformation, does he change into a wolf or a dog or something like he did in
does.
True Blood?
Yeah, he turns into a wolf. That's what happens.
That was just a little nod to our True Blood fans listening. I'm winking at my microphone.
All none of you.
Right.
Yeah. Nestor Carbonell was also in the movie.
I like him.
Of Lost fame. Yeah, it was cool to see him in something else. It's a really cool movie. I think it's hinged and centered on the performance of the main character. If you didn't have a good performance, it wasn't going to be a good movie. And thankfully, Daniel Radcliffe nailed it. So it was a really satisfying movie, and it's it's a really interesting exploration of what it is to be an undercover agent and how serious of a problem white supremacy groups are becoming again, because of the shift and focus on terrorism is all on Islamic terrorism right now, and unfortunately, as a result, this is a fact. White supremacy groups are thriving right now. Yeah. As a result of that, because they're not being investigated and checked by law enforcement like they used to be.
Did you see? And this is a slight tangent. Did you see that like map of the U.S. that had like just it had markers for all of the hate groups operating in the U.S. and it was like it was unbelievable. Like I'm gonna try to find it real quick. I'll edit this out because it was really eye-opening. U.S. hate group map. Take that, NSA.
U.S. hate group Matt. Glad you didn't make that mistake. Or autocorrect didn't screw you on that one.
Yeah. U.S. hate group map, United States. Or U.S. hate group map, Matt Hurt. Obsessive Viewer Podcast. Yeah, it's like, it's just an image of it, but it's like, it's ridiculous. Obviously, this isn't a visual medium, but I'll link it to you, Tiny. But it says this list of 892 active hate groups, up from 784 listed a year before, is based on information gathered by the Intelligence Project from hate group publications. Blah blah blah. Back to Imperium. Quick question for you. I don't know if this is comparable at all. I just know that you're a fan of this other movie I'm about to bring up. But in its depiction of white supremacy and depiction of hate groups, how did it compare to the depiction of that kind of thing in The Believer, the Ryan Gosling movie that you were a big fan of?
That wasn't a huge feature of the movie Believer. That was more of a character-driven movie.
Right.
But it's much more inclusive, which is a hilarious adjective. It's much more inclusive and much more detailed in Imperium, because it sort of details how those groups don't always get along, because it's all about a power struggle, and some people just want to be powerful and they just want to have followers, not necessarily about the ideology of white supremacy. And so there's a lot of infighting, and that's presented in this movie, and I think to pretty good effect. I liked that about the movie. It's much more detailed.
Okay.
It's a good movie. I'd give it a 7. I mean, a good 7 out of 10. I enjoyed it a lot.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out. And I just sent you a link, Tiny, to that hate map, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes in case anyone's interested in being super bummed out about the U.S.
Yep.
So I have the hiccups. So okay. I think that'll about do it for this week's episode of the Obsessive Viewer Podcast. We are going to be recording a bonus episode about Stranger Things just after this. But first, I just wanted to mention, I need to get Mike to update the outro on it, because it doesn't mention anthology.
Okay.
So anyway, just a quick plug. AnthologyPod.com. That's my solo side project podcast. It's exploring science fiction anthology storytelling during television's first golden age. I'm reviewing an episode of The Twilight Zone as a first-time viewer, and also coupling those reviews with a review of a movie or show related to each episode of The Twilight Zone. So, review an episode of The Twilight Zone, also review something that the writer of that episode or director or actor appeared in that's somewhat related to The Twilight Zone. So, science fiction, some genre piece of the time. I'm having a lot of fun doing it. I just released the 22nd episode of it. I'm really happy about it. And I'm also doing bonus reviews covering Black Mirror in the lead up to this third season coming out. So just a quick plug, go check that out, anthologypod.com. Go like the Facebook page at facebook.com/anthologypod, and give me some feedback on it. So I'm excited to be in the swing of it with that.
Nice.
Yep. So, having said all that, Tiny, I think we're done here.
I think we are.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and do this Stranger Things review, and then I think next week we're going to be doing detective movies.
Yes.
Super excited about that. So look forward to that, and thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
How did you see Snowden?
I was lucky enough to go see a matinee on Monday, which was nice because it's a lot cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly enough, there were people there. There were probably like 10 or 12 people in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
I was the youngest by 20 years.
Really?
Yeah, it was weird. It was just all older people, which I guess during the day makes sense. Younger people are in school. Most people are at work. So the older retired people went to see a movie on Monday afternoon. So it was just kind of an interesting audience that way. So I saw a matinee 1 o'clock in the afternoon at a local theater. Nothing,
nice.
Pretty uneventful, really.
Okay, nice. Just a little inside baseball for Indianapolis listeners. You went to Glendale, right?
I did.
Have you been you've been going to that because that's where nearest to you?
It's closest to me, yeah.
Okay. How do you like that theater?
It's fine. What depresses me about it is there's usually not very many people there.
Oh yeah, that depresses you about it?
Yeah, because there's not very many people go to it, and I'm afraid it's going to close down.
Gotcha.
I can go on like a Saturday night. I went and saw X-Men, I think, on a Saturday night there. I don't know if it was opening weekend, but it was pretty new. Okay. And there were like 50 people in the theater, maybe.
I want to say it would have been opening weekends because I think we reviewed it.
I think so, yeah. And I saw it. It was a big release, big deal, and there was only 50 people there. So
wow.
I fear for the longevity of that theater.
And it's funny. This can be a much longer conversation, but I'm finding that to be kind of the case across the board. Like Traders Point, the one I prefer, they don't have late showings anymore. Like their last showings are like 7 or 8. Like they don't have 9 or 10 o'clock showings. And I'll go into my experience seeing this movie. So I started a new shift where I'm working 10 to 6:30, which is great because I'm not a morning person, but horrible because I have no time to go and see a movie. It's one of my favorite activities is to just go straight from work to the movie theater, because I don't have to wear a uniform anymore for my job, which is amazing. To go straight to the theater and see a movie. But now it's like I get off at 6:30, like either the show times are at like 7 and I don't have enough time, or it's like 9:15.
Right.
So I had a chance to see. I left work at 6:30, and the first screening, the closest screening I can go to, was was just west of me at Shiloh, Tiny. And so I go there, and it's the screening is at 6:50. So I'm like, okay, I have 20 minutes to get there. I'm not going to make it in time. Count for, probably an extra 20 minutes for trailer. So I figured, okay, well, I need to see this movie tonight because this was yesterday. I need to see this before, recording. So, and the only other option is to go at 9:50. So I go to the theater, I check in with MoviePass, walk into the theater. I'm thinking like, oh crap, this is a 2-hour and 14-minute movie. I'm going to be kind of hungry. So I'm in line behind someone and I figure, okay, I'll buy a box of M&Ms or something to hold me over until I get out of the movie. So I'm going there, buy the $4.60 small box of M&Ms. And then I go back in line, at which time someone had come in and was behind me. So it was me, him, one lady, and then 2 people at the register. After about 3 minutes, I realized that there's something wrong with the register. Oh. So I'm like, I am cutting, like, this is, at this point, it's like 7:03, and the movie started at 6:50. I'm like, crap. Okay. Yeah. So I went and I refunded the M&Ms because I'm not going to pay $5 for a box of M&Ms when I'm not even going to get to see a movie. And then I left, called MoviePass, had them cancel the check-in so I could see it later that night, and went and got dinner and everything. So I ended up having to go back to that theater at 9:50 to see the movie. And it's amazing to kind of bring it back to what you were saying about the theater and everything. I was the only person in the theater.
Yeah.
Yeah, which makes sense because 9:50 on a Monday night.
Right.
But it's also kind of neat because they're in the process of upgrading their seats. At the theater.
About time.
Yeah, they have some nice recliners that are in the lobby. Cool. So yeah, so it's really cool. But oh crap, I had a really funny joke. Hang on, I'm gonna bring it back. Hang on. So this is so dumb. This might end up being the tag. But anyway. So yeah, so while I was waiting in line, while I was realizing that there was a problem with the register that I was eating up so much time, like the guy who was working the register wasn't even doing anything. Like he was waiting around for like a manager to come. So I'm like, okay, wasting a lot of time. So like in the back of my head, I was like, if I were there to see the movie The Disappointments Room, which is currently playing, I would have screamed like more like The Disappointments Lobby. and then left because movie lobby.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah.
Jokes.
So anyway, so I was the only one in the theater for the screening, which I posted on the Facebook page. I checked in on the Obsessive Viewer Facebook page and I put, I'm the only one here. It's just me and the NSA.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice. I really like those experiences of being able to, be alone in the movie theater. It was also kind of cool because it got out at like 12:14 and like all the lights were out and everything. I was the last person there except for the last like worker, but it was kind of cool. But anyway, so that was my experience going to the theater to see this damn movie.
Thank you for listening to The Obsessive Viewer, presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. You can find more of our episodes at ovpodcast.com, and you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or your preferred podcast app. The Obsessive Viewer's theme song is An Eclipse of Events and is provided by Loudlike from their EP Mistakes We Must Make. You can find that and more great music from them on iTunes and like their Facebook page at facebook.com/loudlikemusic. Any and all feedback on the podcast is encouraged. You can email the hosts individually at Matt, Tiny, or Mike at obsessiveviewer.com or send an email to the podcast in general at podcast@obsessiveviewer.com. Check out the Obsessive Viewer blog at obsessiveviewer.com, where we post movie and TV reviews and the occasional editorial about the business of entertainment. You can also like us on Facebook at facebook.com/theobsessiveviewer and follow us on Twitter at obsessiveviewer, at obsessivetiny, and at IamMikeWhite. If you want more obsessive content in your life, check out our sister site, obsessivebooknerd.com, for book reviews, author spotlights, and a general celebration of reading. Finally, if you're philosophically curious, check out Tiny's side project podcast, The Secular Perspective, which explores the concepts of faith, religion, and existence from the perspective of secular hosts. You can find that at thesecularperspective.com and subscribe to the podcast on the podcatcher of your choice. Again, thank you so much for listening. We love you. Be excellent to each other.